I've subscribed to Forbes magazine for many years, and in the back of the magazine, as you may know, there's a page titled Thoughts on the Business of Life. I always read it for the excellent quotations it carries, like this one by B.C. Forbes. It's when things go hardest, when life becomes most trying, that there is greatest need for having a fixed goal, for having an air castle that the outside world cannot wreck. When few comforts come from without, it's all the more necessary to have a fount to draw from within, and the man or woman who has a star toward which to press cannot be thrown off the course, no matter how the world may try, no matter how far things may seem to be wrong. You know, that's one of the most important reasons for having a long-range goal, the big goal toward which you're working. I say one of the most important reasons because the most important is the fact that you will in all likelihood reach the goal. The trouble with people is not in reaching their serious goals, it's in establishing them. But having a worthwhile goal gives you a reason for picking yourself back up and heading off again. It gives you some place to go. It gives you a reason for getting up in the mornings, especially on those cold, gray, rainy, or snowy mornings when you have to mumble to yourself over and over, "Stay with it. Stay with it." That's when a star toward which to press looks bright and beckoning out there in the murk of the morning, and pretty soon, well, you're on your way again. Later, when things are fine again, you wonder how you could have ever felt so low or even considered giving up for a moment. Without a goal out there somewhere, it would be a simple matter to become an automaton, a cipher, an empty, doll-like figure simply going through the motions, getting up, moving through the day, and going to bed again. Having a goal is why some of the unlikeliest-seeming people who seem to us to have nothing whatever to bring happiness into their lives, are often the most cheerful people we'll see all day. You can bet that there's a goal there, something held in the heart and seen only in the mind toward which they're moving, something that makes it all wonderful for them. In fact, that's the very definition of happiness. We're happiest when we're moving towards something we want to bring about. The secret is in the two words, moving toward. I remember reading in the book Papillon that incredible tale of multiple escapes from the French penal colony in French Guiana, that no matter what the hardships were, or how wretched the escapees' lives, they were filled with joy as long as they were moving toward freedom. Pain, suffering, starvation, exhaustion, constant danger were all worth bearing as long as they were moving toward freedom. And this is why we need to reaffirm our goals on a regular basis, why we need to make sure we know what it is we're moving toward. It's when things go hardest, when life becomes most trying, that there's greatest need for having a fixed goal, for having an air castle that the outside world cannot wreck, and the man or woman who has a star toward which to press cannot be thrown off the course. It's believed that the most common failing of human beings is a lack of self-confidence. We tend to remember our failures and forget our successes. To become healthier and get rid of self-doubt, we have to turn this around. Dr. Maxwell Maltz, in his book Psycho-Cybernetics, wrote that confidence is built upon an experience of success. When we first begin any undertaking, we're likely to have very little confidence, because we haven't learned from experience that we can succeed. This is true of learning to ride a bicycle, speak in public, or perform surgery. It's literally true that success breeds success. Even a small success can be used as a stepping stone to a greater one. We need to form the habit of remembering past successes and forgetting the failures. This is the way both an electronic computer and the human brain are supposed to operate. Practice improves skill and success. In basketball, golf, horseshoe pitching, or selling, not because repetition has any value in itself. If it did, we would learn our errors instead of our hits. A person learning to pitch horseshoes, for example, will miss the stake many more times than he'll hit it. If mere repetition were the answer to improved skill, his practice should make him more expert at missing, since that's what he's practiced most. However, although his misses may outnumber hits 10 to 1, through practice, his misses gradually diminish, and his hits come more and more frequently. This is because the computer in his brain remembers and reinforces his successful attempts and forgets the misses. This is the way that both an electronic computer and our own success mechanisms learn to succeed. Yet what do most of us do? We destroy our self-confidence by remembering past failures and forgetting all about past successes. We not only remember failures, we impress them on our minds with emotion. We condemn ourselves. We flay ourselves with shame and remorse, both of which are highly egotistical, self-centered emotions. And self-confidence disappears. So the prescription is to use errors and mistakes as a way to learning, then dismiss them from your mind. Deliberately remember and picture to yourself past successes. Everyone has succeeded sometime at something, especially when beginning a new task. Call up the feelings you experienced in some past success, however small it might have been. Dr. Winfred Overholser, superintendent of St. Elizabeth's Hospital, has said that recalling brave moments is a very sound way to restore belief in yourself. That too many people are prone to let one or two failures blot out all good memories. If we will systematically relive our brave moments in memory, he says, we'll be surprised to see we had more courage than we thought. Dr. Overholser recommends the practice of vividly remembering our past successes and brave moments as an invaluable aid whenever self-confidence is shaken. So there you are, the prescription for getting rid of feelings of self-doubt, the lack of self-confidence. Forget your mistakes, just as you should forget the bad shots you've made on the golf course, and remember your successes. This is the normal, the healthy way to live positively and effectively. A person who lacks confidence in himself is a person who has never really tested his powers. A test, to be valid, must include a whole lot more than one or two tries. Dr. Kenneth Hildebrand, for many years a Midwestern minister and author of the book Achieving Real Happiness, told of a woman who was married to a cruel, shiftless alcoholic. When drunk, he would beat her and the children. Debts accumulated. Often there was no food in the house. When the eldest child was 7, the husband deserted his wife. She had no money, no credit, no business training. She had to undergo surgery, thus adding to her mountain of debt. A few months later, the youngest child became ill and died. When the father received the news by wire, he telegraphed in reply, "Terrible shock. Sorry to hear the news." His heartlessness so angered the woman that she resolved to rear the children without him at whatever cost to herself. The following 9 years she toiled at any work available. She never lost her determination or her sense of humor, and she prided herself in not saying or doing anything to turn the children against their father. She managed to keep the home together and to make it a cheery one. At the end of 9 years, she married a man who loved her and the children devotedly. To encourage other women undergoing difficult experiences, she said, "Any woman can wring happiness out of life if she's worthy of happiness." Her words are worth remembering. Her happiness and well-being did not depend upon circumstances. She was superior to them. She rose above them. No woman would enjoy going through what this woman had to endure, and every life has its problems. But if we permit our circumstances to dictate how we feel and act, we're relinquishing control of our own lives. And it's our attitude toward others and the world that determines what happens to us. If the woman I mentioned had not developed her cheerful, friendly, successful attitude toward her life, the chances are excellent that she never would have found the right man and married again. A popular fallacy held by almost all young people and a large segment of the older adults is that happiness hinges on pleasant circumstances and congenial surroundings. These people think that if their circumstances were better, they'd be happy. This isn't true. If a person cannot find happiness in his daily life now, unless he wakes up, he will never be happy, regardless of his circumstances. The fact is, whether or not we admit it to ourselves, that genuine happiness is hidden in the quiet simplicities and fundamental virtues of life. These cannot be purchased, even though you could afford to pay a king's ransom, and they at the same time exist for anyone. Every day of our lives is either successful or unsuccessful. If we permit the success of our days to depend upon things such as the weather, the talk and the actions of other people, and if we concentrate not on what we have, but rather on those things we do not have, well, we become little more than small mirrors of our surroundings. What we should remember is that each of us, in reality, shapes his world in his own likeness. If ours is not a happy world, it's because that's the way we see it. Henry David Thoreau wrote, "I'm convinced from experience that to maintain oneself on this earth is not a hardship, but a pastime, if we will live simply and wisely. Most of the luxuries and many of the so-called comforts of life are not only dispensable, but positive hindrances to the elevation of mankind." The job of the good social critic, and we need social critics, is to see beyond the obvious to the supporting layers below. My old friend, newspaper columnist Sidney J. Harris, did that as well as anyone. He once had a column on sons and daughters in which he wrote, "Many, if not most, parents, as their children go through high school and into college, become terribly competitive on their children's behalf. They'll tell you at dinner parties that this child got into such and such a college, that this one is working on a master's, that another is making a certain team or winning a scholarship. Some of these, of course, are legitimate things for parents to be proud of. But there's all this emphasis on doing and so little about being. What is the child like who's getting into this school and making these grades and receiving these honors? As a person, as a family member, as a human being, not as an achievement machine reflecting on the parent's greater glory." He went on to write, "A child should not be a surrogate for a parent's own frustrated wishes or a substitute for worldly disappointments and vexations. What a youngster is, how he or she relates to family and friends and the world at large, is a permanent index of character and worth. And this is what we should be grateful for when we see it in our children, more than all the outward marks of success in the classroom or the stadium. And this is the way they want us to regard them, as persons, not as producers, promoters, performers, or parental ornaments." So wrote Sidney J. Harris. What is the child like? As a person, as a family member, as a human being? Those are the factors that really count in the long run. Is the child kind, thoughtful, considerate, loving? How does he relate to you and to others, to other children? Some of the most wonderful children are not at the head of their class, but they're children who will grow up to be achievers in their own way and who will become fine parents in their turn. We've all heard parents boasting of their children's winning scholarships or getting into such and such university, and I think we're all tempted to ask, what kind of a kid is he or she? I remember a doctor I knew briefly many years ago. He had come to our relatively small community as an assistant to a doctor we all liked very much and who was cruelly overworked. He had been selected because of his phenomenal grades in medical school. He had been an honor student all his life. It took us only a month or so to realize we didn't want him, and we refused to see him. He was a cold, unfeeling machine. He had the personality of a estuarine crocodile. And he was money-centered. He was in it for the money, and it didn't take long for everyone to realize it. For all his brilliance and scholarship, he was a failure as a doctor, as a human being. He should have been working in a lab in a pharmaceutical house someplace if they could put up with him. He left a short time later. I'm sure his parents were proud of him and boasted of his scholastic achievements. It isn't what we achieve, it isn't what we have that causes us to become a success. It's what we become along the way. And it starts in our childhood, of course. In their book, Type A Behavior in Your Heart, Drs. Meyer Friedman and Ray H. Rosenman talk about two kinds of personalities, the Type A and the Type B. Type A is the one who's prone to the heart attack. He's the hard-driving type. He often moves up faster in an organization than a Type B does, but he usually dies before he can really enjoy his hectic success He's highly demanding, easy to anger, rushing from one place to another, highly visible, drives like a demon. You know the type. Incidentally, when I say he, I don't mean to indicate that these types are restricted to men. They're not at all. As many women are affected as men. Type B, on the other hand, is a more passive type. He rolls with the punches, has a better sense of humor, mixes better with people, likes people better. He's a hard worker and conscientious, but he's not in a hurry all the time. He intends to enjoy the trip as much as the destination, and while he may move up more slowly in an organization, he'll probably last longer and live to enjoy his well-earned retirement years. What if someone is an A? How can he become a B? He can still reach his goals, enjoy the trip a whole lot more, and live to be old and in excellent health. Well, here are 7 things someone can do to become a B person. 1. Do one thing at a time. Stop right now, today, trying to do more than one thing well at a time. 2. Listen without interrupting. No matter how much it hurts, learn to listen to what the other person is saying until he finishes what he wants to say and has a right to say. 3. Read books that demand concentration. Read The Brothers Karamazov by Dostoevsky or Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago, or books by someone such as Saul Bellow. 4. Eat leisurely. Savor your food. Find out what food really tastes like. Enjoy it for a change. Take smaller bites and savor them. Put your knife and fork down on the table between bites instead of having the next bite ready and waiting to be wolfed down. 5. Have a retreat where you can be alone. Sometimes that's tough, but it's important. 6. Avoid people and events that irritate you. I can hear some rather interesting comments and see a few rueful smiles on that one. Don't go to parties if you don't like them. Don't see people you don't like. 7. Plan a loafing period every day, a time when you can perhaps stretch out and relax. Read a good book or take a short nap. And my old friend Chris Hegarty adds one more to that list. Drive within the speed limit. Find out what it's like to arrive calm and collected, rested, and at peace with the world. If you're in such a hurry to get there, leave earlier and drive within the speed limit. It's wonderful for the nerves, and statistics prove it'll help you live longer. 8 ways, then, for an A to become a B. Don't be an A. Stress kills. Slow down. Decide what you want to do, where you want to go, and relax in the calm certainty that you'll arrive at your goal in good time, with good health, and serenity to boot. I received a letter from one A. Robertson, informing me that I had been appointed to an honorary position of some prominence in the community. Since it had included a framed certificate suitable for hanging and was unquestionably a bona fide honor, I wanted to thank the person sending it. But there was no indication on the letterhead or in the letter as to whether the sender was a man or a woman. Just A. Robertson, Executive Director. Now, a director can be male or female, no hint there. How would you address the person in a letter? I suppose you could call to find out, but when you write a letter to someone, I don't think that you should first have to institute an investigation to determine the person's sex. There's no time for that sort of thing. When a letter's turn to be answered comes up, you should be able to answer it on the instanter. Don't you agree? Now, he or she wrote to me as Mr. Earl Nightingale. But Earl is a dead giveaway. Nobody in his right mind is going to name a girl Earl. But what do you do with an initial? No matter what it is, the letter writer's sex is still in question. And you just can't start a letter, especially one in which you're thanking someone. Dear Robertson. Well, do you know what I did? I addressed the letter, Dear Person Robertson. Now, I know it's a person, and after all, person is about the highest designation possible on this earth. We're all persons first, and then whatever else we happen to be second, third, and so on. And person makes no sexual designation. It doesn't withhold sex, nor imply its withholding. It's a good, rich, sound, full word. Person. And as I wrote the thank you note for the honor bestowed upon me, I was aware that I was writing the letter in a slightly different way than I would have if I'd known for sure the sex of the person. I was writing the letter in a third way, not as I would if writing to a woman, not as I would if writing to a man, but different from both, and for some inexplicable reason, better than either. Addressing myself to a person, it seemed as though I were writing to someone of slightly higher rank. Interesting, isn't it? And I fell to thinking that that's what our kids are trying to tell us as they work their way through the difficult years. Look, I'm more than just another boy or girl. I'm a person. And our husbands and wives are trying to tell us the same thing. We tend to forget how wonderful and complex, how fraught with potential, a boy or a girl or a man or a woman truly is, if indeed we ever knew or thought much about it. Research is constantly uncovering what amazing, virtually limitless creatures we are. When writing a letter to a person, you're writing to the greatest creature the earth has produced. I was aware of that as I wrote the letter. Now, that isn't to say that we always act up to our true stature, nor that most of us are even aware of our true worth, but it's there all the same. So I'm going to send a copy of this issue of Insight to the person who wrote me that nice, complimentary letter. He or she may get a charge out of it. I meant no offense. After all, he or she is a person. I've often thought how nice it would be to be the maker of a product such as Oreo cookies. Oreos have been around for nearly 100 years, and just about everybody loves them. What a beautiful product. Just sit back, relax, and watch as the profits go there. No matter what your product is, you can't ever just sit back and relax. The other day, I was in the grocery store, and I saw packages of Oreo cookies that had been dipped into and were now temptingly covered with fudge. To Nabisco, it apparently wasn't good enough that it had one of the most wonderful cookies on earth. It was now offering Oreos dipped in fudge. And the fudge-covered Oreos didn't affect the original Oreo cookie shelf space. They had their own shelf space in the store. I had dinner one time with the man who invented the pop-top aluminum can opener, the one that stays fastened to the can. His name is Jay Morton, and he receives a royalty on every one of those openers produced. But he's not sitting back. In fact, he wrote the Superman movies. Can you imagine one person producing two products so unrelated, so different? Jay's wife, Lucy, owns and operates one of the most beautiful designer furniture showrooms in the world in Miami, Florida. Lucy's an interior designer who knows her business. I chatted with her on the telephone today, and she told me she's thinking of opening another showroom in Beverly Hills. If she does, it'll be a big winner. And I hope she does. We'll see more of her, for one thing. She's a beautiful, brilliant woman. Oreo cookies dipped in fudge. A revolutionary can opener. The Superman motion pictures. And magnificent furniture showrooms in Miami and Beverly Hills. Now, you might be wondering, what in the world do all these disparate ideas, successful as they are, and believe me they are, have to do with me? Imagination, my friend. Just more proof that, as Henry Miller once put it, imagination is everything. How are you doing in the imagination department? Can your product be dipped in fudge? What exciting ideas have you come up with during the past year? Care to write them down? How much are they worth, would you guess? If even the Oreo cookie can be improved upon, something most of us thought could never be done, it means anything can be improved upon. Is your package as simple to open as a can of whatever you want to drink? Can you imagine a writer of motion pictures inventing that can opener? Why not? It's true. Imagination is everything. And we're the only creatures on the planet, as far as we know, with the power of imagining. Imagination brings excitement, possibilities, adventure, love, fun, and good food into our lives. Imagination is the scout that leads the way and motivates us to try, to give it the best that's in us. When we lose the capacity for imagination, we lose everything else. The problem seems to be that a sizable segment of the population uses its imagination in a negative way. These people seem to be driven by necessity more than they are by fun and enjoyment. Perhaps it's the result of generations of eking out a subsistence. And if our imagination, our thinking is limited, barren, or bleak, that's the way it's going to be. After all, we're the ones who send out that scout. It's our imagination that's setting the stage for us. If we're held in some kind of limited prison, it's our imagination that's done it. It's our doing, and let's never forget it. Changing that mindset is so important and often so difficult. Maybe we need a little vacation once in a while, a bit of rest to stop and consider how things are going. Maybe it's time to dip the cookie into fudge or come up with a new can opener. After all, there's a Superman in each one of us. And we need to do some possibility thinking. Maybe we need to see a showroom like Lucy's. In fact, you might want to drop by there. It's called Lux, L-U-X-E, and it's at 45 Northeast 39th Street in Miami. When you look at the kind of furnishings Lucy has in that store, you begin to start thinking in terms of possibilities. It's a labor of love for Lucy. After all, her husband invented that opener and wrote the Superman movies. I wonder what Jay's doing these days. I suggest that you begin sitting for a few quiet minutes every day. Early in the morning's best for me, all by yourself perhaps, and let your imagination do a bit of scouting. You can come up with ideas too, you know. Ways to improve the things you're presently working with, ideas that can revolutionize your life. Keep this thought in mind. Imagination is everything. That's everything, not to be confused with some things. Imagination is everything. We tend to do that which we imagine ourselves doing. We can become only what we think about. Oh, and I learned something else about cookies. If the cookies are broken, you can eat them with impunity. It seems that when a cookie is broken, all the calories leak out. Some time back, I was playing golf with a couple of friends from what we like to call the old days in radio. Incidentally, the old days in anything are the days when you were first starting in something. They've nothing whatever to do with the beginning of an industry or an art form. In the course of our conversation, mention was made of someone who, as the speaker put it, had decided to rest on his laurels, decided to try to play it safe, and I got to thinking that most people who rest on their laurels are singularly short of laurels upon which to rest. Now, this is not always true, of course. The athlete who decides to retire while still champion, or the person who reaches the age of quietly sitting back and handing the reins of activity to others, is often respected and admired for his decision. But generally speaking, those who collect the most laurels, that is, those who do the most and are quite naturally rewarded for what they do, are the least likely to rest upon what they've done. And conversely, it often seems that those who have done and are doing the least, those who have the fewest laurels, do the most sitting on them. They are the very ones who seem to be taking it easy. We're creatures of habit, and those men and women who early form the habit of keeping busy by developing many interests or throwing themselves into a consuming interest of some kind tend to remain busy people for the rest of their lives. They don't pay too much attention to the laurels they amass, but rather keep moving on ahead of them. I remember seeing a cartoon depicting the great Leonardo da Vinci at his workbench working on a model of some kind of helicopter. All about the room are strewn the amazing collection of things turned out by this revolving genius, and some character is standing in the middle of the room saying, "What I mean is, Leonardo, aren't you spreading yourself too thin?" Well, it was a very funny cartoon. There was no way for a man such as Leonardo to spread himself too thin. There were no thin places in his genius. Emerson had something to say on this. He said, "As long as your genius buys, the investment is safe, though you spend like a monarch." Yes, it's a paradox of man and the world that those with the most laurels do the least resting. Those with the least do the most. I remember hearing Billy Casper, one of the world's all-time great golfers, say, "I find that the more I practice, the luckier I get." He said that after just winning the U.S. Open and then successfully defending his Western Open title in Chicago. He was far too busy winning new laurels to rest on the big pile of old ones. Getting back to our golf game discussion about the man who had decided to rest on his laurels, his value as a performer to his employer and himself began to diminish the moment he switched from being opportunity-directed to becoming security-directed. Chesterfield said, "Idleness is only the refuge of weak minds and the holiday of fools." And Carlyle said, "In idleness there is perpetual despair." It's all right to rest on one's laurels, but never more than a week or so.